We also now have new policies on Tibet, on Hong Kong, and Biden, within his first week on the job, ordered 2 aircraft carrier battle groups to do freedom of navigation sails through the South China Sea and actually carry out military exercises within sight of the Chinese military emplacements. And then, of course, there's Catherine Tai. In addition to most of her professional experience being suing China, she's ethnically Taiwanese. The Chinese perceive this as a full court press. They're not wrong. And any American businessman who thinks that they can carry on business as usual in a country that now Democrats and Republicans have both condemned as genocidal, think again. This relationship is probably going to end this year. That doesn't mean there aren't any bright spots. If you're looking for places to sell, there still are a lot of opportunities. What this map is it highlights every country in the world with a positive demographic growth story, as well as sufficient access to oil that they can keep the lights on. Anyone in green, anyone in blue. The difference between the green and the blue is that the countries in blue, from a security point of view, are secure, and the countries in green are likely to face some significant security challenges, whether it's internal or external. You guys are all familiar with the Mexican drug war. You know how nasty that gets? Mexico's blue, indicating it's safe, just to kind of give you an idea of where the threshold is. Now, there's a few stories within this. First, the Western Hemisphere, particularly Mexico, that's locked down. That's a good story. Very few security problems, and because of American shale and American finance, you should expect this region maybe not to continue as it has, but to have a pretty positive growth story moving forward. Second, Southeast Asia. You guys do face some tropical competition down there, but the real story for Southeast Asia is that this is a region that has been so fractured by geography with mountains and jungles and peninsulas and islands that it's never really gone to war with one another. So as the global rules break down, there's not a lot of regional animosity that could boil up into something bad. They're also broadly self-sufficient in all the industrial inputs that are required for them to industrialize and maybe pick up some pieces from China along the way. One thing they don't have enough of is food. This is a very urbanized region. And one thing that everybody who lives in a city has in common is they have to import their food from somewhere else. It's likely to be, after Mexico, our second largest growth in sales for agricultural output writ large moving forward. And then third is South Asia. It's kind of separated from a lot of the geopolitical hullabaloo, and India by itself is almost 1.5 billion people. So even if it just holds steady, maybe gets 1% growth, that's still a relatively robust growth story in the aggregate, especially in the world that we are moving into. Sure, so the labor situation, it's a global problem. We've had drops in the birth rate even in the least industrialized countries in the world. We don't think of, for example, as a place like Yemen for being an industrial powerhouse, but they have sewers now, they have electricity now, they have urbanization now that we had a century ago, but they're going through it more quickly than we are. So the whole world is urbanizing and moving towards smaller families that are started later. That cannot be undone on anything except for a multi-generational time frame. In the case of Mexico, their birth rate started dropping 20 years ago. Net migration from Mexico has now been negative for 11 years. It will not recover in the next 20. Central America is only 5 years behind. So the Central American caravans, we might have those for another 2, 3, 4 years, and then they will stop as well, just because there won't be enough people. So the traditional methods of getting labor into tree fruit industries, they're not going to work much longer. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't keep pushing, because there's a big difference between it happening tomorrow and it happening 4 years from now. But you already need to start planning for something else. There's really only 2 options. Number one, and I realize that this is not politically easy, maybe not even politically possible, refugees. Sponsor refugees. But you can imagine what it'd be like for the industry to sponsor 100,000 Syrians coming over right now. Just the political mood specifically couldn't support it. But that's really all that's left. Second is automation. One way or another, you are going to be facing fewer capable hands at a higher cost. And as we've seen in every other sector that had to wrestle with this, automation is really the only way to square the circle. I realize the technical complications. I realize the capital complications. And I would just underline that calendar year 2021 is the final year of relatively low cost lending. So do it now. Well, three things. Number one, this is going to sound a little weird, but we can't accuse China of not being a market economy and then being annoyed when they actually use market means to get what they want. They paid more for the containers to get them earlier. I realize that's not something you want to hear, but that's true. Second, it's not a stable trade relationship anyway. We know that the overall relationship with the Chinese is going to probably collapse this year. So that specific problem, insufficient containers, that's probably going to go away real soon because the volume of trade is going to collapse. Third, it's time to diversify the trading relationships anyway, even if China was not becoming increasingly hostile and increasingly unstable. Mexico obviously is the largest place to look to that's close. But it is time to get along very, very well with the Southeast Asians. In every American agricultural sector that has gone to Southeast Asia to try to find friends, they've been pleasantly surprised with how warm the welcome has been. Thailand is a logical starting point because it's one of the more developed countries, but it still has 65 million people. Vietnam has blown most American agricultural away at how friendly they are to everything that we do. And all you have to do is mention that you don't like the Chinese very much, and all of a sudden you're going to be a godparent. They're also, the number one consumer per capita of pork in the world, and everything that Americans export food related is something that they want. They are industrializing, they are moving off the farm, and they are having more income that they can spend on things like food. So there's a replacement market there that is friendlier, that is more stable, and that will be with us for the long haul. Well, that's kind of three pieces in one. Number one, no, I don't expect the Biden administration to lead this charge. Biden has made it very clear for months now that he has no intention of launching any trade talks until coronavirus is firmly in the rearview mirror. Now, while for the United States, that will happen in just a couple of months, I have a feeling that he's going to interpret that a little bit more strictly, and he's going to mean the world writ large. So you're talking 2023, probably before you would start. And by that point, the China relationship will be gone completely. Number two, whether or not Southeast Asia can replace China. The more economically successful Southeast Asia is, the more it urbanizes, the more it gets into manufacturing, the more food it's going to need. So the long-term growth path is robust, and the stuff that they need now is significant. And the more problems that other agricultural producers in the world have, the more room there will be for American stuff. But if you're looking for a straight one-for-one replacement, it's not going to be that neat. Remember, because of China's financial model, flood everything with capital, they are not cost sensitive. And everything that China does, from building roads to building superconductor fabrication facilities to importing food, is not cost sensitive. So the type of growth story we've become used to with the panda boom isn't based on economic reality. So it exploded and then it's going to implode. But the Southeast Asians are not like that. They run on a financial model that is much more similar to our own, where if you take out a loan, you actually have to pay it back. Wild concept, which means that any sort of growth in the trade relationship is by definition not going to be as meteoric as what we've seen with the Chinese, but it also means it not only won't go straight up, it also won't go straight down. There's certainly going to be competition. Remember that the Mexican system, two things to be concerned about. Number one, it's not as stable. They don't have the water resources that we have in the United States. And they don't have the capital that's necessary to do irrigation on the scale with the reliability that you guys have. So it's not that I want you to talk you out of there, but it's not. The cartels have largely taken over citrus distribution in Mexico, right up to the border. How we wrestle with that in the bilateral relationship, we have no idea. This is something that was completely ignored under both Trump and under Obama. I have no idea if Biden's going to take it seriously. So far, the relationship between the US and Mexico under Biden has at least gotten off on the right foot. Not nearly as rocky as the start after the last two presidents. But this is not just an economic competition issue. The cartel that is most involved, and that will bring them into your backyard. So if you don't have a good relationship with the FBI, you might start edging in that direction. I have two bits of bad news, one of which will turn into a bit of good news for you. While agriculture is the economic sector that foreigners can pressure the most, it is not the only economic sector in the United States that is internationally linked. Tech manufacturing is just as exposed as you guys are. So what happens is Silicon Valley designs something and then it's built in East Asia. That entire relationship is going to implode, which means that Silicon Valley needs to build an entirely new manufacturing model. It can be done, and it can be done here and in Mexico, but it can't be done overnight. So California writ large is going to face a significant economic challenge in this deglobalization process. That will probably be of a net benefit for you, because all of a sudden the attraction of going to the coast isn't going to be there, and it'll be a little bit easier to get and hang on to your labor. So take that for what it is. I'd say that the biggest problem that you guys are facing, in addition to labor, is going to be water. And there's no way around that. Even after the last drought you guys had, you still haven't finished your basic water census. So some of the things that were done as a matter of course in Texas in the late 1800s, California still hasn't started on, which just blows my mind for in a region that is so dependent on moving water from A to B and irrigation in general. I don't have a good solution for you. You already do drip irrigation. You don't have a lot of open trenches. You've already done a lot of the basic stuff, especially after the last drought. But at some point, there needs to be a rationalization of how California manages their water resources. And if agriculture does not lead that process, you do not want LA doing it, because you know where that'll take it. So front load that as much as you can.